growth. Uh, I am your host, Ken Cook. I'm here with my illustrious partner. He's over this way, David. And we are super excited to have you joining us today. Today we're talking about perhaps one of the most important subjects when it comes to beginning your marketing process, and that is market message matching. And what we mean by this is, how is it that we take the message that you have and match it to your market in such a way that those people are going to find the message appealing? And so, David, why is it that more people don't do this with everyday marketing?
Well, I think the biggest reason, and you and I encounter this all the time, and I think I probably sound like a broken record talking to clients on this particular subject, is that many businesses go way too broad with who they're trying to serve, who they're trying to sell to, who they're trying to support, etc. And therefore, it's really hard to have an effective message because you're trying to reach way too many people who have lots of different reasons why they might be considering, your business or your services or your product.
Okay.
And so that I think that's probably the biggest reason why businesses miss out on this.
Because they're marketing to everybody.
Or they're marketing to too many people. Yes, I mean, it's, I think what happens is many businesses recognize that there's not a lot of value, or it's very expensive, or it's not necessary to market to everybody. So what they do is they say, okay, I'm not going to go this wide. I can't do this because it's a smaller screen now. I'm not going to go this wide. I'm only going to go this wide. But really, what they should do is go this wide. And I think that's the big difference, is that they will narrow what they think is narrow enough, and it's still too broad.
Yeah. Well, I think that's this idea of there's so many people who are going a mile wide and an inch deep, right? We talk about this a lot. And we're asking them, hey, what would it look like in your business if you went an inch wide and a mile deep?
Yep.
And what would that ultimately mean for how you're perceived in your very narrow space? What would that mean for the types of customers you could actually acquire? And ultimately, how would that look for you growing?
I think ultimately it's a heck of a lot easier to grow when you are focused very narrowly on who you're serving and what you're offering. Now, there's because what happens is you become much more visible to those people. Yeah. So I think that's the reason why, and I think that's probably why people aren't doing it, is because it's tough. I fully admit, and I think you've probably been through the same situation in your business before we started working together, which is that we wanted to. I mean, when you start a business, you serve and sell to anybody who's willing to buy from you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's a bad habit that you start off right away because you're like desperate for the business, for the clientele, and so you're looking for opportunities, and then, well, that's what you do. You serve anybody and everybody. But if you can get into that more focused, narrower approach faster, I think you'll find that suddenly it's a lot easier to grow a lot faster and more effectively. And the reason why is because of the way that you can communicate so very specifically to a very well-defined audience.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is if you don't know who you're talking to, it's very hard to speak to them, right?
Yeah.
Is if you're just shouting into the darkness and hoping somebody hears, well, it's going to be expensive because you've got to have a lot of people hearing to get that right person.
Yep.
And I mean, I think in the early days of the internet too, that was the model, right? Banner advertising, right? This was the old time newspaper, the train model. We're going to throw ads up.
Ken, I think we may have lost your connection or your audio. I'm not sure if your internet went out or... Oh, okay. Looks like you're back again.
I am back again.
Okay. You said throw ads up, and that's the last we heard. And you've paused again. Okay. I think the point that you were making, and I'm sure you're going to be back in a moment, is that partially it has to do with the history of how we existed in our marketing in general. Is that we had whether it's offline, major publications that everybody read, and so you would back 100 years ago, there were all of the daily newspapers that were competing, and there were not specialty journals, for example. So that's one problem that I think we've encountered, is that historically you were speaking to the masses. Hopefully Ken's going to be coming back, but as we have been able to move toward more focused, I think you should be back. Let's see. There we go. How's that now?
It's great.
Okay. Don't move. Don't do anything.
I'm not moving. I swear.
So historically we were talking about, or I was talking about while you dropped out. People didn't have the option to narrowly focus in their advertising. If you think back 100 years, it was all newspapers that were, the general public, and it was mass media magazines and things. And then you had mass, media, radio and television. And so, the beginning of the internet, you're absolutely right. It was banner advertising, but we've now found ourselves in a position where we can, target much more effectively. That probably started with direct mail. It started with, our ability to speak to specific individuals based on who they are, what they do, what they're interested in, all kinds of different criteria.
Well, I think one of my favorite books of all time is Claude Hopkins' Scientific Advertising, and he also wrote another fantastic.
I'm waving to Elise because she's saying hi. Hi, Elise.
Called My Life in Advertising, and he talks a lot about, in these books, and both of these books were published before 1920, so just perspective, right?
Yeah. I know that this is not a dramatic pause. You've actually sadly paused again. So I think you may be having some internet issues over at your end. And so I'm not quite sure the point. Oh, okay, there we go.
The connection to our streaming service is coming in and out, but I'm seeing you and hearing you the whole time.
Okay.
So
we'll try to muddle through this.
We will. Hopkins' entire idea here is, how do I put my ads in front of the right people? And that was what he, for a generation, was trying to do. I mean, man, he advertised for 40 plus years. Yeah. And that was his sole focus, was how do I market to the right people? And a lot of that, I think, came down to putting ads in the right places back in the day, right? And so if we're selling a specific thing, maybe we're setting an ad in a corner drugstore, right? Because we know the kind of person that comes there. Well, today we have that to the nth degree, where we can create audiences of one, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. I think if you look at certain dystopian movies that have advertising in the future, one of my favorites is Minority Report. Do you remember this movie? So there's a scene where Tom Cruise is running by, and there's a giant glass screen that greets him by name and says, "You appear to be sweating. You should buy some Gatorade." And I think that's to a degree where we're heading, and to a degree where we already are.
Yeah,
is we can pull data and say, this is the only person I want to talk to. One of my favorite stories around this was, there was a marketer who asked his fiance, or his girlfriend at the time, to marry him through Facebook ads.
I have a friend who asked his wife to bring him a cup of coffee while he was in another room through a Facebook ad.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of power that we have with modern day advertising tools. I think the disconnect though is, well, who should I even talk to?
Yeah.
And so, as you look at this, how is it that you typically go about starting that process of knowing who is it that you're going to talk to?
Sure. Well, let's use our friend Elise, who happens to be watching us right now, because she owns a business that has an opportunity to appeal to many different types of individuals.
Mhm.
And when we started working with her on looking at, people who are dealing with bone strength issues, balance issues, that was one area that she could focus on. But then there was strength training for people who were athletes who might be younger. Then there were just general people who wanted to feel better physically. And we kind of talked about all the different audiences out there. Well, one of the things that came to light really early on in our discussion of the different audiences that she could market to was that, and she owns a franchised business, so there were other examples of success from other franchisees. And what one statistic that she saw was the stick rate of a certain group of people was
Yeah.
much greater than the others. And so that naturally suggested to us, okay, well, as a business, we're going to have a better opportunity, a longer period of, this is a subscription based, a recurring, fee based business. We're going to have a better opportunity with this audience if we consider that that piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
lose other people a lot faster, and so our marketing dollars are going to go a lot farther, because we're going to ultimately bring in this much more revenue when we go after this market. So that's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of others. I mean, it's, who do you enjoy working with? Who do you think is going to be the easiest to convert? Who are there the most of? And where is there the least competition? And lots of other things. But that's, I think, where I would start.
Who's the most profitable?
Who's the most profitable? Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big one that a lot of people are using right now is,
Mhm.
is who do I actually reach that drives the most income to the business?
Sure.
And so one of the things that I'd like to talk about with this is, how is it that we are researching some of those things
Okay.
in terms of discovering that audience? Because in many cases, I think what happens is you start a business and you're selling some things, and you're having to figure out how is it that they can talk to the right person. How is
Yeah.
it that they can interact with that right person?
Okay.
And what is the right person ultimately? What does that mean for them?
Yeah.
So they have to go through these steps of saying, well, here's what right is for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they've got to say, well, what does that person look like?
Yeah.
If you will.
So I think one of the things is that you start with some assumptions, but really, I have run into, and I've run into this in my own business, but I've also run into this with a lot of clients, where the assumptions are not necessarily entirely correct.
Mm.
And so, you got to do something, which is step back and say, all right, I'm going to let go of my biases, and I'm going to do things like collect data. I'm going to ask people, right? I'm going to, and maybe I'm going to ask my prospects, why didn't you buy? I'm going to ask my customers, why did you buy? I'm going to ask my employees, what did the customers say to you when you're working with them, or when they're shopping, or whatever the circumstances are in your business. So that's one area. But there's also questions about, who are these people when they're not engaging with our business? What can we learn about them so that we could engage with them or speak to them in a way that is going to be interesting and appealing and attractive to them?
Mm-hmm.
Are we using the right language? How do we find that out? These are all things that you hear me talk about all the time.
Yeah.
And fortunately, because of the technology and the amount of data that exists, we have access to a ton of answers to the questions that I've just raised here.
Yeah.
Well, we can dive into a few ways that you can do that research in a couple minutes. But yeah.
I also think there's this issue of what problem do they face,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is I think we've seen that recently, that where you have a number of businesses say, well, there's a problem that people are facing. How can we solve that right now?
Yeah.
And this kind of that much more entrepreneurial mindset, if you will. I think we saw that with Ringside Steakhouse. Did you hear about this?
I think you told me about some. I don't remember.
They were selling steaks.
Mhm.
So they're selling their steaks because the meat was going to go bad. The restaurant was shut down, right? So they decided, hey, we're going to sell the steaks out of the back door. They created a mile-long traffic jam going down Burnside
Mhm.
with people just lining up to come buy steak out of the restaurant.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that kind of a thing too. Is, well, what is the problem or the need that the consumer has, and that's going to be a way that we isolate down. Well, who are we talking to?
Sure.
Right.
Well, and
Elise pointed this out, right?
Yeah.
She said there in the comments that she needs to go after those people who can't go to a gym right now.
Mhm.
Right. That's perfect. Right.
Yeah, but here's the
need.
Yeah. I mean, that's a short-term opportunity that maybe she can leverage. But overall, how are you going to position your business to continuously and regularly attract people? So I mean, the Ringside and the lockdown things are kind of aside from what we're talking about in general. But yeah, absolutely, there's understanding what the problem is so that you can put your solution in front of them based on the problem that they know they have. I mean, this is something that I talk about quite a bit, which is understanding, as a business, the solutions you offer, them really well. Why they're important. Why that why you are shaking your head every time somebody doesn't take advantage of your solution.
Yeah.
Gosh, these guys, I don't understand why they don't see it. The light. I understand it. Everybody else should understand it too. We feel this way in our business, but the problem here is that most businesses do not approach the issue from the point of view of their prospect.
Yeah.
What is the problem the prospect knows they have?
Mm-hmm. They approach it from, what do I want to sell?
What do I want to sell, or what do I believe the problem behind the problem is? Right. So you jump ahead in the away from where the prospect really is. But the key to all of this is that you got to meet them where they are at the moment that you first connect with them, and then lead them down the path to your solution.
Yeah.
So that requires education. There's a concept that we've talked about many times, which is market sophistication.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically the market's awareness of a particular topic, right? How well do you know? Let's use weight loss. It's a classic example. At some point in history, it was the concept of you can lose weight simply by taking a pill was introduced to the general public. Mm-hmm. Now, at that point in history, there was not a great deal of market sophistication around how do you lose weight, right? So the introduction of take a pill to lose weight was a very new thing, and there was a lot of education around that. There was then the next step, which is, okay, everybody kind of knows you can take pills to lose weight, but what about pills with this particular ingredient, right? Again, more education. And so because we are so advanced, so developed in a lot of our understanding of our own stuff, as a business, we make assumptions that the prospects know things as well as we do. And that's a bad assumption to make.
Yeah.
it gets us in trouble. It gets us out of alignment with where they are at the point that we are first connecting with them. And that's why we started this by talking about the phrase message to market match. It really is important that your message is meeting them where they're at.
Yes. Well, I think that's the biggest thing here is if you're talking to a market and they're not where you are, you're wasting a ton of time and money ultimately
Mhm.
because people aren't getting it,
Sure.
and I think that's the hardest thing is we've all seen businesses struggle because they're not getting customers in the door, but they don't understand that fundamental to getting people in the door is them actually understanding what it is that you're saying.
Sure. I mean, this is we've tried a whole bunch of different angles on selling the stuff that we sell, which is really about a strategic marketing process. And one of the things that we played around with, and I think it resonated to a certain extent, was stop wasting time and stop wasting money. That's a big key to a lot of this, is that many businesses are wasting time and money by doing inefficient marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's understanding the pain point, the problem, from the perspective of the prospect, and then understanding how they articulate the pain point or the problem is another key. We've been working on this with a couple of clients recently. You want to talk a little bit about this idea?
Yeah. So one of the big challenges is how do you reflect somebody's language back to them in a way that the person says, "Oh, they really get me."
Mhm.
Right? So, for example, if you've got a 1950s era hot rod, I'm going to imagine that the $29 or $19 oil change from Jiffy Lube has very little appeal to you because the message there is speed and cost fundamentally. But what do you care about as the hot rod owner? You care about protecting your investment and you care about the knowledgeability, how knowledgeable somebody is who's doing the job. And you maybe care about the quality of the job that's going to be done.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's I think a very high likelihood that the Jiffy Lube ad does not appeal to the hot rod 50s era hot rod owner.
Yeah.
Right. And this type of mismatch, while that seems, I think, for most of us like obvious, right? I think this occurs in the small business world everywhere, and it occurs daily. And I
Sure.
think it occurs in businesses of people who are smart enough to not do this, but just haven't taken the time to think through, well, who in the world am I talking to?
Mhm.
And what am I talking to them about? And why do they care about this? And that's the first question I always ask myself is
Mhm.
why does this person care? Right? I've got something. Why do they care that I have this? How does
Yeah.
this make their life better? How does this, right? What does this do for them? And thus, how are they going to think and talk about it? I'd love to give an example of this, which is
Yeah.
we have a client who's opening a pizza shop in a small town that doesn't have a pizza shop, and most importantly, there is no other pizza shop that delivers in that town. And so he said, "Well, it's a no-brainer. We're the only pizza delivery shop. You can either drive 20, 30 minutes to get pizza,
Yeah.
or you can come to us."
Mhm.
Because what people care about with pizza is largely convenience,
Sure.
right?
Sure. I mean, there's the classic. We've talked about this very recently. There's the classic ad from, I was going to say Pizza Hut, but it's not. It's Domino's,
Domino's,
right?
30 minutes or it's
Domino's.
free.
What? 30 minutes or it's free, or yeah. And the idea behind that is not the best pizza. It's not the classic traditional Italian pizza, just like from the old country. It's you're going to get it fast,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be hot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they promise, and that's what they deliver, and that's what people expect from them.
Yes.
Right. But if you're looking for fancy brick oven pizza, you're not going to them.
No.
Because they are speaking to a different audience than you. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the whole piece there is stepping back and saying, well, within the marketplace, what consumer do I want to talk to?
Mhm.
Right. I think that's the beauty of this is there can be multiple businesses in the same sector, but they're talking to different consumers who care about different things.
Sure.
Right.
They can sell the same exact thing, but they can sell it in lots of different ways.
Right.
Which is one reason why you can not easily, but you can get away with selling without ever competing on price, because you can compete with an audience around whatever their priorities are. Some people it's price.
Yeah.
But some people it's something completely different.
Right.
So I was thinking about. Go ahead.
Well, so I was just thinking in this kind of example that we're using here, you've got Domino's and you've got Pizza Hut.
Okay.
Is there really a functional difference between the two?
I don't know. Just it's not. I have to say I have no practical personal experience with either of them.
Right? Why?
It's because I'm not their consumer. I'm not their target.
Because you don't.
I was going to say to you, I don't know. Does Pizza Hut deliver? I have no idea.
Right. But I think that's the point. Is you have two companies that are very, very similar,
Mhm.
that have, through marketing, really created differentiation.
Yep.
Right now, I'm not necessarily that consumer either, so I don't necessarily know what the differentiation is. But there is a point of differentiation.
Yep.
In the same way that Coke and Pepsi have points of differentiation. Right? Ultimately, it's fizzy cola water.
Mhm.
Right? That's all it is. It's fizzy flavored water. But they have differentiated themselves from one another.
Sure.
In major ways. In so much so that you have people who swear, "Oh, I'll never drink this one or that one."
Mhm.
Because I think what's happened is they've created an identity that ties to the ultimately to the brand, not to what's inside the can as much.
Sure. And then there's obviously regional preferences and all that sort of thing too. You can't go to Atlanta, Georgia, and see a Pepsi product anywhere.
That's
Actually, you can, which is really funny. I remember going to Atlanta and somebody ordered a Pepsi Coke, and I was like, "What's that?" And Coke is interchangeable for soda, or right?
Yeah.
So they wanted a Pepsi Coke.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting a little off topic.
Man.
What I did want to talk a little bit about was, you can start making these assumptions, but really gathering data and knowing, who that consumer is or who that ideal prospect is in a much deeper way can benefit you tremendously.
Yes.
We were just working on a ideal client avatar for one of our clients. Which is basically building out a single individual who's representative of everybody that they would be marketing to. And we go into painstaking detail about this individual, everything from gender, age, marital status, family status, how they spend their days, what's important to them, what's not important to them, where they went to school. I can't even think of all the other things. What books they read. Yeah, things like
psychological motivations. I mean, whole nine yards.
And the idea behind this, it may seem like a silly exercise, but the idea behind this exercise is really to give a business the ammunition to effectively talk to this individual in their advertising, in their email campaigns, in their sales letters, in their brochures, whatever material that they are using to communicate, in a way that is appropriate to be received by that individual, right? I'm going to talk to my, my great aunt in a very different way than I'm going to talk to my daughter, or I'm going to talk to some stranger on the street, because I have a different relationship with them and I have a different impression of who they are. And so by gathering the information about who this ideal client is, you can be much more effective in the way that you communicate with them. So, one thing that I do when I am researching is I am going into uh, uh, communities online, places online where I can quote unquote eavesdrop on what the ideal prospect. Let me explain what I'm talking about. So maybe I am, addressing a problem related to, we work with financial advisors. So pain points that people have around their retirement planning or their investing. So maybe I'll go to Reddit, or maybe I'll go to Amazon to read comments about books that people have read, or I'll go to a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or some other forum online, and I will look at the motifs, the themes that keep recurring in comments that people are making, until I can get a clear sense of who is this individual that all of these people, I'm reading comments from, represent, because they are using similar language, they are complaining about or asking questions about the same things over and over again, etc. And so that's a great place. Quora is another great site for that. Used to be Yahoo Asks. I don't think that's around anymore. But there's a ton of places where you can get this kind of information about what is important to people. What are they actually asking? What do they want to know about the thing that you could present an answer to?
Yeah.
And then there's other things in terms of demographics and behavioral stuff that I'll do research-wise. We've talked about using data from Facebook, from Google, especially in their advertising platforms, where we can do research on what is important to people. What do they do? What are they interested in? So that we can paint a real clear picture of individuals.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's actually a tool that a friend of mine, Rand Fishkin, just launched maybe a week ago now, called Spark Toro.
Okay.
He's been working on it for a couple of years now, and it allows you to see what podcasts, down to the level of like what podcasts people are listening to based upon what websites they visit.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so you can get very specific in some of these cases, and we have tools that are giving us massive amounts of information to be able to say, what does this person really value, and what's important to them, and what are they doing with their time, so that we can understand who are they really as a whole person, as opposed to just the 2 minutes that they're shopping with us.
Yeah. And again, this is the point that you made earlier, which is that the consumer, whether they are already a customer or a client or a patient or of a business, or they're a prospect, wants to have a acknowledgement of who they are and what matters to them. And so for somebody to see an ad that talks about you're struggling in your relationship with in your marriage, and it doesn't say your spouse or your partner, it says your husband, right? Because it's an ad clearly targeted at women, and it talks about the fact that they are parents, that she's a parent too, and it talks about the fact that she's tried other solutions that just have never worked out. And so for the ideal client, all of that added layers of description about who she is, right, gets that person to go, oh, they really get me. It's clear that this is for me, not for somebody else. Now, somebody else who reads that and goes, oh, well, this isn't for me, that's okay, because there's plenty of that first prospect out there. And it's going to be a much easier sale to that prospect because they are they already developed a predisposition and an affinity for what's being offered.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that disposition and affinity piece, and
Mhm.
really understanding, well, what does that look like, and where are they? How do we codify that?
Sure. But I think to a certain extent, it's a leap of faith for the business in the first place.
Oh, of course.
And
I mean, that's yeah. I mean, you're for lack of a better term, you're taking your best guess and
I mean,
hoping.
I remember early on when you and I started working together, and I said, "Hey, I've struggled with this narrowing in my own business,
Mhm.
but I finally, started focusing on um, what ended up being coaching and consulting professionals."
Yeah,
And I really didn't want to work with coaches specifically. I wanted to work with people who had some advisory role in their the model that they had of a business. And so I tried to talk about it in a very broad way. I said consultative professionals, I think is what I said. Who I served. And there's nobody out there who identifies themselves as a consultative professional.
yeah.
And that just blew eggs, right? It just did not work. But to the same, but then I started focusing when I started my branding around financial advisors, and I launched the website Advisor Inbound. I said, well, let me try this. I know that they need the help that I can offer. I know that they have the money to be able to afford my services. I know the process. It's the same process that I would be offering to other consultative professionals, but it's much more targeted, much more specific. And suddenly, without advertising, right, I just started putting content up there.
Yeah.
People started finding me and reaching out to me and saying, "Hi, I hear you work with advisors." And then I realized I was onto something. Right?
Mhm.
So you just got to take a leap of faith.
I think that's the biggest thing is it does take faith to drive into a narrower niche because you feel like you're giving up so much,
Mhm.
but the reality is you're not giving up very much. What you're doing is um, you're gaining a lot because you're gaining notoriety, respect, and perceived value in an industry or in a vertical, to use the technical term, uh, that you otherwise would not have had.
I I liken this to when people complain that they're getting unsubscribes from their email list.
Mm,
And it's the same thing. It's like, well, that person was never going to buy from you in the first place.
yeah.
Or people complain about the emails. I mean, for some um, of my business activity, I send a lot of emails out for clients. Right, I'll write a daily email, and sometimes people write back and complain. You email me too much. Well, what would I do if I was the business owner? I would scroll down to the bottom and hit unsubscribe and just forget about them. They're not for me.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same. It's the same sort of thing. You just have to realize that not everybody's going to be for you, and the more that you can um, detract people who are not going to be a good fit and attract people who are, the more effective your overall marketing is going to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the real key is I think one of the best questions that we ask people, period, is who is not your customer?
Mhm.
And there are so many business owners who have never thought in those terms, who've never said, well, who do I not want to work with? But that question really derives a lot of value because it eliminates so much
For
wasted
sure.
time, wasted effort, waste in terms of getting customers that aren't profitable. All of those things can be avoided by simply saying, yeah, this guy's not for me.
I think you and I have both had the same experience in our businesses where at least I was, going out and I was doing anything and everything I could to get business, and I would work with anybody regardless of what their budget was. And if it just meant, oh yeah, you can pay me a little bit, sure, I'll figure out a way for it to work. What I found in my business was those people who didn't have a lot of money ended up being the most demanding and the most time consuming.
Because there's a reason they didn't have very much money.
Yes, and I kept ratcheting up my fee as I got more and more experienced, more and more knowledgeable, to a point where those people went away because they just couldn't afford me, and I had to change my attitude about what was I worth and all of that as well. So I think, I mean, all of this goes hand in hand. Is I now know that I am not going to be a good fit for, or they're not going to be a good fit for me, small businesses that just don't have lots of needs and no resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's challenges figuring out for yourself in your business who is not a good fit for you. Right? Is who do you not want coming to your gym? Who do you not want buying your services because it's not worth it?
Yep.
And I told somebody one time, every bad Yelp review is a customer that should never have spent money with you in the first place, because you brought in somebody who wasn't aligned with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you simply didn't bring them in, they'd be happier and you'd be happier. But because you brought in someone that wasn't aligned, because your messaging wasn't aligned and wasn't clear and wasn't specific, sure, you made a you said something or made a promise that they didn't, that you either didn't want to make, didn't intend to make, or they understood something you weren't saying, and now the expectations and the reality are here and here.
Sure.
Wait, there we go.
There you go. You got it now.
And the real question is, how do we get them so that they're aligned?
Sure.
And there's real synergy, if you will, between expectation and offering, because that's where everyone's happy. Is this is what I intend to buy, and this is what you give me. This is fantastic.
Right. And quite honestly, not only does it take the leap of faith, but it also takes a good bit of trial and error testing to see where you get where you get it right, where you find the happy medium, where you end up with more happy customers, clients, patients, and fewer complaints who are unaligned.
Yeah.
So it is not like, as consultants, we walk into a client and we flip a switch and go, oh, all you need to do is this, this, and this, and your business is going to be, perfect overnight. That's not how it works either.
Yeah.
But we can help folks make really smart, informed decisions about how to move from the here to the here.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right.
I think we've probably exhausted this one.
We have.
I always want to encourage folks here in the group to share what's going on in their business, ask questions, even after the fact, after we post. If you want to contribute to this conversation, please, by all means, do. Go ahead. If you have a question for one of us, feel free to tag us, and we'll respond to you as well. Ken, do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off?
If you didn't get what we just talked about, this might not be the right group for you.
How appropriately phrased for today's discussion. Excellent. Yeah. I would say that there are a lot of folks who we encounter. You spend a lot of time out there doing networking.
Yes.
And I try to avoid it at all costs. Yes. But there are a lot of folks who I will start a conversation with when I've been out networking who have no idea what I'm talking about. And as soon as I recognize that fact, I say, hey, it was nice meeting you, and I'm going to go use my time more efficiently, and you probably should do the same.
You say that to people?
Well, yes, I'm from New York. I'm a little more direct than you.
Wow.
No, I don't say that.
You know what? It's been nice meeting you, but I'm going to attract somebody much more valuable, and you want to do the same.
Yeah. No, but it's, I think it is a good idea to recognize where there is opportunity and where there is not, and
Yeah,
to pursue opportunity, and to not waste your time in places that it's not going to advance your
absolutely.
business.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing is
Yeah.
you've got to eliminate the waste. You've got to become fanatical about
Mhm.
cutting the waste because that is what drags small business down.
All right. Well, with that said, I think let's sign off. We got an extra 15 minutes of time in our schedule to get some other stuff done. Let's go.
High five?
Let's.
Oh,
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah. I'm. Oh, wrong
other
way.
way. Other way. There we go.
Wow, we totally missed. Anyway, thanks for taking some time with us today. And like always, if you have more questions you'd like to contribute to the conversation, we'd love to have your participation here in the group. So we're going to sign off, and we look forward to seeing you again here next Tuesday. Have a great one.